for some of you, welcome to My Chat. My Chat is a monthly chat that focuses on talent management issues. And so glad to have you here. This podcast is going to be around 25 minutes. And after the podcast, we're going to move to Twitter and have a half an hour discussion on what we've discussed today and some of the key themes. So what are we going to be talking about today? We recently published the results from our Global Talent Recruitment Survey. It was our third annual Talent Recruitment Survey. And basically the results are talking about some of the things that are happening in HR, the good, the bad, some of the challenges, some of the best practices. And this year, one of the things we changed is we focus a little bit more on the leadership piece as well. So our guest today is someone who knows a lot about that subject. So I have here, I'm going to be speaking with Mark Crowley, and I'm happy to say that Mark Crowley is a repeat guest. He was actually our first guest when we started My Chat. And Mark is a leadership expert, and he's also written a book called Lead from the Heart, Transformational Leadership for the 21st Century. Wanted to make sure I said that properly and didn't butcher it. So I'm so happy to have you here today, and I also have to personally say that I really think Mark is an awesome person. So welcome, Mark.
Thank you very much, Kristen. I'm thrilled to be back.
So Mark, tell us right from the beginning a little bit more about your background and what you do with companies.
Okay, well, that's a great question to start off with. I think that the very first thing that I would say is that it's irrefutable at this point that the way we're managing people is not working. It's really failing when you think about the number of people in our society that admit openly to being not engaged or just modestly engaged, sort of what I call meh, you know, I just go in and do my job kind of a thing. And what we really want are for people to be turned on. That's what the goal of engagement is for people to just, you know, to have their heart in their work, which is universal language. And so my whole thesis is, and what I'm teaching organizations is that traditional leadership practices are failing because people have evolved in what they need and expect in exchange for work, and our leadership practices have failed to evolve. And the principal understanding that I'm trying to communicate is that we have historically made people feel that their work is about doing their work and getting a paycheck in exchange, and we thought that that was fair. It's no longer fair, in the sense that people need so much more than that. We know that feelings and emotions drive human behavior. And so what people care about, what they commit themselves to, and feeling loyal to a boss and loyal to a company and loyal to doing everything they can for an organization is based on this. It's not based on this. Mm-hmm. And so what we need to do is to teach leaders, teach individual managers how to give people the routine and consistent experience of positive feelings and emotions, which we know translate into optimal levels of human performance. So when people are made feel cared for, feeling valued, feeling appreciated, know that they're growing, know that they have a boss that advocates for them and isn't competing with them, which is one of the biggest complaints there is in business today. They're threatened by the very people that are supposed to be their advocates. These components, this is what drives human performance in the workplace. So we need to change our model of what workplace management looks like and adapt one that is much more aligned with the needs of people and human beings in the 21st century. That's what I'm trying to convey.
So I love that. I'm glad you're doing that important work. I think that there is a shift we're seeing in organizations. So when you're working with companies, Mark, I mean, in what capacity are you kind of working with them? Are you doing speaking engagements? Are you doing consulting work with them? What does that look like? What is your toolkit look like?
Well, it's both of those, obviously, and it starts often with the speaking engagement because you're getting in front of, in some cases, many cases, I'm talking to CEOs. A lot of times lately, particularly, I'm talking to industry organizations that bring CEOs together. Maybe like a manufacturing group where they don't have any other way of getting together with people who are like them. So senior managers, senior leaders wanting to, they're intrigued by what I'm talking about and they want to hear it for themselves first. Next week I'm speaking to a very large group of CEOs of healthcare providers. They're either owning hospitals or they own senior care centers. And they're looking for ways of driving engagement and keeping their people, because obviously they're caring about the well-being of other people and they need to figure it out. So they're very much aligned with this. But I will tell you that this idea of leading with heart still strikes many people in business as being a controversial, sort of weak, soft idea that doesn't match up to what we do in business. You know, you're not going to be able to drive performance that way. And we've historically believed that because we think we need to keep the emotions out, we need to do everything from the head, when decisions of engagement are really made in the heart. And there's science around this that's so compelling, that shows that when people feel supported, when they feel valued, when they feel cared for, when they feel safe in an organization, that translates into thoughts that say, I'm going to give more to this. I want to think about this company on my way home. I want to come in early. I want to work late. I want to give discretionary effort. I want to repay an organization that cares about me. I want to care about them as much as. This is what we do instinctively as human beings. And so it's interesting to me that healthcare is brought into this first. Education, my book is being taught in 4 universities. The teachers have embraced this quickly. The business world is the one that's held up the, oh, that won't drive numbers and performance. And, you know, my last position was to manage 2,000 stockbrokers. These are people that are fully commissioned. You know, you think they're just in it for the money. And yet the more that I did to demonstrate that I cared about them as a human being and help them grow and help them support and make sure that I cared about what their business was and what their advocacy was, because each of them had a slightly different motivation in terms of what they were trying to do with their clients.
Yeah.
They scaled mountains for me. And so there's no denying that this is the future of leadership. It's just some people are willing to embrace it faster than others. We have to get over our old paradigms, our own beliefs, and our own fears that, you know, you bring the heart into business and somehow this is going to backfire and lead to lower profits and lower productivity. It works just the opposite way.
Yeah, absolutely. So let's get on a more tactical level. Let's talk about some of the key themes that emerged from our Global Talent Recruitment Survey. And some of these things are definitely very related to leadership and some of the topics that we just discussed here. So one of the things that we found from our survey that HR pros were telling us, 62% answered in our survey that cultural fit was a real problem. So when you think about something like cultural fit, and from their standpoint, we're talking a lot about recruitment and hiring, they were getting individuals who are not the right fit for their culture. What do you think some of the things are that companies can be doing to improve that cultural fit? So we're not having 62% of people saying that that's such a huge issue for them.
So the first thing I'd say, Kristen, is that we can't be quick to the trigger. Sometimes there's so much pressure to get a position filled that we sort of look at people and we think, hey, their resume, these people can do this job. Yeah. They have the ability to do this job, so give them the job. And what we're not discovering is whether they have the heart for the job. Now that's important because there are plenty of people that have the talents and the skills to do certain work, but really don't want to do that kind of work. So right. That's a big question, is can you demonstrate to me that this is sort of your, you know, this is who you are? This is going to set your heart afire. You know, are you going to be really happy doing this kind of work? But another component of this is that I think companies need to do a better job of opening their own kimono. Mm-hmm. Exposing people that are coming in to interview to the culture itself. So we need to be much more transparent about how we actually do the work. And one way of doing that is to, if you've got a candidate that you're thinking might be a good fit, have them set up an appointment where they can go meet with some of the employees, not with you tagging along, so that they can have the tell me what's the worst thing about working here conversation, right? I mean, we've all heard about what a horrible place, theoretically, Amazon is to work, right? We've all heard about their sort of toxic, difficult, oppressive culture, and yet they continue to find people to come to work there. So there are certain people who will gravitate to an organization like that. And we shouldn't begrudge that. They're a very successful organization. It may not be the one for us. And I think that's the way of getting to it, is by making sure that the employees have an opportunity to meet with the candidates. And then, if, by the way, the candidate can also, or the employee can give you feedback on whether they think that there's going to be a fit. So this is another one way of doing that, is to take top people. Do this for recognition. Do this to reward people who are already thriving and excelling in a job and saying, for example, Kristen, you are fantastic at what you do. And I'm interviewing for more people like you. So what I'd like to do is teach you a little bit about the interview process and then include you in it so that you can give me feedback. I can't tell you the number of times. What I would do is I would narrow down the final candidates, and then I would bring in 3 people who I was hiring for one. And I would bring in 2 or 3 people who work for me into an interview in a panel. And I would say, tell me what you think. And they save me. Oftentimes they'll see things because they know the job better than I do. You do know what you do more than I know what you do. And you can say, you know what, there's something about this person that I know isn't going to be a fit. So thoroughness is really the key. And again, opening the kimono. We don't think to expose people to what it is that we do and how we do it because we're afraid if we do, they're not going to stay and we're not going to get that person. Wouldn't it be better to see that person opt out before they come on board?
Exactly.
Because, right? I mean, seriously, we're much better off having that person say, you know what, I really kind of think this isn't going to be my cup of tea. Great. You've prevented yourself a future problem, and then you can bring in somebody who's going to be a better fit.
Yeah, I think that's so important that companies need to be more honest about who they are and the good and the bad, right? No company's perfect. This is what it's like to work here. These are some of the pros that come along with it. These are some of the things that for some people it might feel challenging. So to be honest about that, because if you're just trying to sell the individual on the company without being honest about it, it's in the long run, like you said, they're going to leave anyways. And I also believe what you're saying there is to not rush through the process. It's better to spend a little bit more time up front to ensure you're getting the right person, have more stakeholders involved in that conversation, to sometimes take away some of that bias effect as well, right? Because that's one person's take on what you're looking for. If you can have more individuals involved in that process, there's less of a chance of that happening as well.
I totally agree with you. And what you also want to do is to avoid surprises. You don't want people coming on board and going, well, nobody told me, I never heard, And so my reputation, if you ask people to describe me in one word, they would probably, people that used to work for me would probably use the word demanding. So I had very high expectations, true, very high expectations. I wanted to, kind of thinking, if this is my life on this earth, I want to have something good to show for it. And I think that's true for you. If we're going to work, we should work hard and do great work, right? Have great results, be proud of what we accomplished. Not everybody's on board with that, And so I wanted people to know right up front that, hey, if you're coming to work for me, we are a championship team. We're not just in this just to, play our games and go home. So if you want to be on a championship team, that's what we're looking for. And if people don't, they can sort of telegraph to you either directly or indirectly that this isn't going to be a fit. And so I'm much better off not hiring that person in the first place because they're not going to meet my expectations and I'm not going to achieve what I want to achieve. So we have to think sort of like sports coaches. They only have, like a basketball team, they only have 5 people on the floor. So at any one given time, anyone who's going to be one of those 5 has to be the right person, right? One person can just really destroy the success of an organization. So being vigilant, as you say, is critically important.
And that's a great example because that right person actually wants to be pushed outside of their comfort zone. They want you to help bring the best out of that individual, and that results pushing themselves harder than they might have previously if they didn't have you really working with them to be that coach, right? So that's a great example. So let's get right into leadership because there's some results that came back from our survey that I think are a little scary. So one of the things that we asked is, we asked our HR pros, how would you rate your current leaders? And when we got the results back, 25% would say, you know what, our current leaders are excellent. However, the other 61% rated them as somewhat effective. And then the other 14% said, I actually think they're not effective at all. So what that's telling me is 75% of people are saying, well, our leaders are okay. That's a problem for me. I'm sure you would agree. What's going on here?
Well, we have to change our model of who's going to be a good fit in management is really what it comes down to. And what this says is that we can sort of impute that the people aren't getting what they need from their leaders, which is why they're not successful. So we're judging the leaders, but it's really based on how the people that are under them or their subordinates are performing for them, right? So my belief is, and by the way, Gallup has demonstrated that they believe 2/3 of people who are in management roles today lack the ability to really supervise and influence other people successfully. And I believe that that's the case. And a lot of that has to do with the fact that we will take, for example, a top salesperson and say, to reward that person and keep that person from leaving, we're going to make them the sales manager and obviously elevate all the other people to her or his standards. And then we're surprised when that person fails. And the reason is because the talents that are needed to be a top salesperson, who they're singularly focused, they're not collaborative, they're not thinking about advocacy, they're not thinking about cooperation, they're thinking about how do I get to be number one? And so that focus, we bring that person over and then have them supervise and manage other people. Well, they don't give up those stripes. So they're threatened by the success of their people. They don't want to share, they don't want to teach, they don't want to encourage, they hold back on recognition. It's a mess. And you know, the best example I have of this is I'm a San Diego Padres baseball fan, and back in the 1970s and 80s, the team has always been very mediocre. And in the late 70s, early 80s, they had a backup catcher, so he wasn't even good enough to be their number one catcher. And he's a lifetime 220 hitter, did nothing to really distinguish himself, but he was competent enough to be in the major leagues, right? Yeah. But they made him a coach. And guess what? His name is Bruce Bochy. And in the last 8 years, or I think last 13 years, he took the San Diego Padres to their first World Series since 1984. And he's won 3 World Series. He's a Hall of Fame manager. This is one of the greatest managers ever. And so we've got to be able to say, who we put into management roles, they have to have the skills to be a manager, not necessarily the best salesperson or the best architect or the best accountant. Who's the person that's going to be an advocate? Who's going to be the coach? Who's going to be the person who's going to grow and develop other people? Because that's really leadership. Is about growing other people and making other people successful. And that's, I think, the gap. That's why we have so many people, because we're promoting the wrong people. We need to change the paradigm.
Yeah, I agree completely. The other piece that we addressed in the survey that I think is another challenge is that not enough companies are investing even in the people who they do put in leadership, who do have the competencies, who do have the propensity to be really good leaders, but they still need some training around that, right? To be leading people is very different than being an individual contributor. And whether you have the right attitude and all that kind of stuff, there's still some skills that you need some coaching around it. Why do you think some companies still don't get it, that they need to be supporting and investing in their leaders in that way?
It's an enormously big question because it doesn't make any sense at all. I can tell you that through the course of my career, I evolved so much. And I think back on mistakes that I made with people in many cases, where, as a young leader, I lacked the ability to understand what I was confronted with and messed up, and how I handled it. And through a lot of self-work, to be honest with you, a lot of personal investing, reading, asking people for feedback to tell me what are my strengths and what are my limitations, and going to work on those. But a lot of people, they're too busy to be thinking that way. And so the organization, as far as I believe, needs to help people get to that, a man in full kind of mentality where they have the courage to make tough decisions, and they can stand up to challenges, and they can give people voice and allow people to give dissenting opinions and not feel threatened by that. And so what we're really looking for is leadership development that can help people identify their limitations and then give them strategies for making them better. So because these are the people that have the greatest influence in your organization. So if you're not investing in them, they're not getting any better. And if they're not getting any better, then they can't elevate the people they're working with. So if we want our constant, we want constant growth and achievement within our organizations, and we're not investing in our leaders, that's just a flawed strategy from the get-go. And so, and I also believe very much, Kristen, that it needs to be developing people as the whole person, not just teaching them, some skill related to their job. Help people be broader, because when I really truly believe when you improve one discipline in your life, you inherently improve all disciplines of your life. And this is the gap that I think is huge, and another reason why we think we've got a lot of average managers out there. We're not investing in them.
I really believe with you with the whole person. I think it's the same with the employee too, right? You can't expect them to be one person outside of work, another person there. You need to be coaching that whole individual, and same thing with the leader, helping them as a whole person. So when we start to think about the traits of what you'd like to see in a leader, I mean, we did ask on our survey, and the number one answer response that we got, 72% of people said empowering, that leaders need to be able to empower people. And then behind that was being strategic thinkers and being able to build trust. And that came in at 52%. So what would you say are the most important traits you'd like to see in leaders?
They're not on that list. Not to say that those things aren't important. Obviously, I'll start with trust. That's the most critical element, and leaders are wise to make sure that they not only establish it, but that they do everything to sustain it, because it's almost irrevocable if you lose trust with someone that they're ever going to give it back to you 100%. But my fundamental word is caring. We need, and this is controversial to some, but what we need are people who care about the well-being, success, growth, happiness of the people they manage. This is what we need in business today. And you can still drive performance. I'm evidence of it. But what really people need to know is, am I working for an advocate? Am I working for someone who cares about me? Do they care about my growth? Are they promoting my growth? Are they happy when I succeed? This is a big difference in business. And I think that growing people, appreciating people, recognition is one of the greatest responsibilities. Recognizing people for their accomplishments, their efforts, their contributions is one of the most important practices in business. And yet, time and time again, we see people just go, you know what, thanks, you got that done, and we worked hard, but we got to get on to the next thing. And people never get a moment to savor their victories. And yet, every leader in the world knows recognition is important, and yet we don't do enough to really make sure that people know on a very consistent basis, systematic basis, that you are doing great. I'm grateful to you, and I know what you're doing to make yourself great. I know you came in on the weekend. I know you're staying late. I know the contributions you're making. I know the sacrifices you're making. That's what people need to know, and they need to hear it person to person, not just, okay, team, way to go, excellent, now let's get focused on next quarter. That's not what we're talking about. So these are all hard things, by the way. Caring about people, growing people, making sure they feel appreciated. This is all about the heart.
So when you think about something like caring, is that something that's naturally ingrained in someone, or is it something that you can develop?
Fantastic question. Some people will not be able to get this because it's just not in their stripes. They're just that they think about themselves most of the time. This is the principal complaint from many people in business, is that they work for a leader who cares about themselves and no one else. Yes. So there are gonna be some people that won't get over that hurdle. But I really believe that part of my mission is to give people permission to manage this way. Because as I said to you, Kristen, I just think I'd like to see you be a little bit more caring with your people. A lot of times people go, thank you, because I've always wanted to, but I didn't think that I could. And, our culture, we have to keep this separation between church and state. And I'm not talking about having a beer with them or having them over for Sunday dinner. I'm talking about getting to know people and, being authentically concerned about who they are as a human being. This matters different. Yesterday, I had breakfast with a woman who I wrote about in my book, interestingly, somebody who worked for me for almost 20 years. I haven't seen her in about 6 years. And she told me, I said, what's the best thing about your boss? And she said, my boss invited me out to dinner when he was in town. She's got a big job, so she doesn't see him very often. And he invited my mother to go with me. And she was like, that was the reaction. She said, he's a bit of a jerk most of the time, but I forgive him for making that one decision, just to be that thoughtful.
Yeah.
And, and it doesn't have to be all that. It's really just demonstrating that people can feel when they think about their boss, when they're driving home on a Friday night at the end of a week. Does my boss care about me? Does my boss know what I do for him or her? Do they appreciate that? Because if those things happen in yes, 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 that person's driving home feeling really good about what they're contributing, and they're looking forward to coming back on Monday. If those answers are no, 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 that's going to be, I don't want to go back to work on Monday.
Yeah.
You know?
And I love your example of just giving them permission to do that, right? Because there's some people who naturally have that inclination, but the culture of the organization is not like that, which we're going to have to wrap up soon, and we could talk for a whole other half an hour. But I think what that's translating to is how is everybody else modeling that behavior, right? If the people at the very top of the organization's not modeling that behavior, those people, whether they're told they can act like that or not, even if they're given permission, if they're not seeing it being modeled at all the other levels, it probably doesn't feel real and authentic, and that they're really actually allowed to do that. So I think it's really important that you can't just say, okay, well, we've decided we're now going to become a caring organization, so everybody start being caring. I believe quite strongly it needs to come from the top down and then all the way across. But those types of behaviors need to be rewarded as well, and accountability for people who are not really behaving in that way.
Well, I will say that I worked for many people through the course of my career who didn't have any of these inclinations. Yes. But that didn't keep me from managing people that way.
Yes.
And so I would say to someone who's saying, well, I'm not getting that kind of management, why should I give it to my people? Because you're going to drive greater performance. People will want to work for you. Yeah. You'll attract better talented people because you build a reputation for growing people, for creating a great culture. And your performance will be great. And ultimately, your company will reward that, either financially or through promotions or recognition, because you're going to get great performance. So I wouldn't wait for the organization, even though when you get a top-down motivation, CEO making the decree that this is how we're going to lead, that's great. But you may not get that. You may not get that for a while. And the last thing is, because you've got a big HR audience here, is hire these people now. Let them influence the other people in the organization. Every time you make a new hire these people. Going forward, you'll strengthen your team very quickly that way. And then the people that are working in the company start to notice, well, what are they looking for in the people that they're bringing in? And what are the things that they're validating? And then we start to emulate that.
Yeah, I like that. At the end of the day, you can only take ownership for yourself, right? So right now you can take that ownership, and for you can make those changes. You can't decide what everybody else is going to do, but you can decide for yourself that you want to approach it in that way.
Love it.
Yeah.
You can decide for yourself. It's a choice.
Yeah. It's always a choice, right? It always comes down to choice.
It is.
So Mark, thank you so much for being here today. And like I said, that there's so much more we could discuss, and maybe we'll even have you back for part 2, because I feel like we kind of scratched the surface here with all of the different key themes that came out of our survey. So what we're going to do now is we're going to move over to Twitter and have a half-an-hour discussion where Mark will be joining us, and we hope we'll see everybody over there.
Fantastic. Thank you.
Thank you.